Remember the 5th of November. That's right. Tonight we are talking V for Vendetta. We're going to take a little break from the outside world. So I hope a few of you come in and hang out with us and don't think about something that's going on that really doesn't matter. I don't think so. So we're going to talk about this. Seems sort of timely. I have a couple people hanging out with me tonight to discuss the V for Vendetta. First up, we got Mr. C. Wood. What's going on, Carson?
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having me. I'm glad you guys hit me up for this because this is my first time reading this thing, and I can't wait to talk about it.
Yeah, me too. Like I was going to ask you about that. I had never read this, so I'm taking it your first exposure, like mine, was the movie and not the book.
Yep, absolutely.
So nice. So it'll be good to have another first-time reader see what you think about this. We also have, well, I think we have Mr. Big Will. Oh, there he is.
Oh, I have arrived. I have read this before, and I was reading it again. I've also seen the movie, and it's my birthday book, so I have a slab copy of number 1.
Very nice, very nice. So we got another guest who's going to be here in just a minute, but I'm going to run through the chat before I bring them in. What's going on? We had Ruben hanging out, tailgating. Backseat driver is hanging out with us. Thank you, sir. Fish Tropic, what's going on? Dennis, thank you for hanging out. Boone Revival, I'm going with Boone. I don't know for sure how to pronounce that. So thank you for hanging out with us. See Wood. So, all right. We're just going to pop him in the background because he had something. He's just going to join us in a minute. We got the Geek Aficionado is also going to join us for this. But I want to ask you, Big Will, you had read this before, but was your first exposure to this story the movie or the book?
I've actually read it a couple times. This is probably like my third or fourth. But no, my first experience reading it was reading it before the movie existed.
Okay, so you actually did read it before the movie. Very nice. So yeah, so that's probably a very different experience than we had having seen the movie before we ever read this. So that is cool. So I usually like to start with initial thoughts. I want to start with you, Carson. This was your first time reading. What was your initial thoughts as you went through this? Just kind of impression overall.
Yeah, it's just kind of weird you mentioned the movie and stuff like that and how important it is to us now because I really enjoy that movie. I've seen it many times since it came out in 2006, and for whatever reason, I've just never really sat down and read V for Vendetta. I've always said I was going to and wanted to, and I just had never have. And then one day you're like, "Hey, I'm doing V for Vendetta. If anyone wants to join me," I'm like, "Yeah, I'll do that." So I finally own up to myself to reading this, and I haven't decided if I really enjoyed reading this after seeing the movie so many times. Because now I have the voice of Natalie Portman in my head when I read Evie. And, of course, Hugo Weaving anytime V talks. And any of these other characters, I have my own perception of what these characters should be. But then the book presents them in a completely different manner than the movie. So it's kind of off-putting and makes you have to reread several pages. So I just had to get past this big hurdle that was the movie, which stupid me actually watched 2 nights ago because at least I'll have this perception of the movie that I could read the book a little bit more seamless. Oh no, that I don't recommend doing that at all. No, I would have read the book 2 days ago and then watched the movie right before this. So just getting over the hurdle took me a while to get over, to be honest.
Yeah, I have a very similar experience. Like every line by V, I just hear Hugo Weaving. It's just like there's no Hugo Weaving and Natalie Portman are clearly the voices for me in this book. I did read it before I rewatched the movie. I hadn't watched the movie in several years probably, but I do really enjoy that movie. So yeah, I had a very similar experience to that. I did do what you said. I don't know if it was good or not. I think I should love myself some time after the movie to then go back and refresh here. But Big Will, what about you? What's your not necessarily on this reread or going back through it, thinking about it, what was your first impressions of this story? You said you've read it several times.
Yeah, well, my impressions were the same. I knew what I was getting into, but the first time I read it was like, hey, Watchmen was good. This will be a lot like Watchmen.
No.
No. It's just as good. I actually like it a little better than Watchmen personally, but no, I knew what I was getting into. And just to be fair to everyone, I stopped at book 1 because I'm a very slow reader. I'm a very good reader, but I'm slow. I have dyslexia and stuff. So there's 3 big sections of the book: book 1, book 2, and book 3. And I got through book 1, but there's still book 2 and book 3 to go. But I have already read it a few times, so I'm good to go. But yeah, the movie's good. What happens is basically the same if you watch the movie and you read the book, but how it happens, dialogue and all that is different.
Yeah. Sure. And I think the portrayal of V and Evie are very consistent between the movie and the book. Yeah. The portrayal of all the party members is very different. Not necessarily their roles are somewhat similar, but they're very different characters than what you see in the movie.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but since you guys watched the movie before, then you read the book. Even after reading the book, the movie lets you know the gist of the story, but it was basically the milk. You got into the meat and potatoes when you actually read the book, and you're like, oh.
So I found that it tracks pretty well.
There's Jimmy.
Hey, how's it going? It tracks pretty well through, I'd say, about half of it, right? So the original story was told actually in multiple parts across a magazine. So published in a magazine format.
Yeah, Gore mentioned that in the chat, that he picked it up in the middle.
Yeah. So there's 3, so as Will mentioned, there's 3 volumes to it, but that volume is a collection of I think 9 of the stories that it goes through. And you get into each volume. 1, like you said, tracks pretty well with the film. 2 tracks partially, and then kind of goes off some different characters and some different things. And then 3 comes back around to the film with a few other things. Like Evie getting being taken and put into the camp, into the prison and everything, and going through that process. But it definitely has the characters do play differently. That's assured, except for Evie and V. But Evie does have several changes to her character.
She does have several changes, and we'll talk about that in a second. So, Jimmy, were you introduced to had you read this before you saw the movie, or did you see the movie first?
I got this originally in my first collection. I got this off the rack.
Okay.
When I was a bit younger, but I'd read it back then in the 80s, and then I hadn't read it again until actually just this week. I'd picked it up and had meant to go back and read it again, but hadn't for a very long time. But thank you for this. It gave me the opportunity to kind of go back and look through that. It's I've seen the movie several times, and I enjoy the film. I do. And I got to be honest with you, I don't understand why Alan Moore had so much trouble with it. I'm looking for what was taken out that meant so much to him that he constantly kind of shits on every theatrical perforance of his.
I feel like he does that about any kind of adaptation of any of his.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
I think he just doesn't. I think, and this is just me, Alan Moore is the crotchety old man. He likes to yell at the crowd. And I think he just, to him, this is the format that it should be told in, and it shouldn't have been messed with. I think is really what it comes down to.
Well,
and I did notice it was interesting, because I did rewatch the movie, that at the end credits, it talks about based on a graphic novel illustrated by David Lloyd, and his name's not on it because
he asked to be taken off.
Yeah, he asked to be taken off. And I'd forgotten that until I was watching the credits while going. I was like, oh, yeah, I remember that now. So, I think it's just he doesn't think that his work should be interpreted in a different way. Yeah. Because he crapped on the Boston movie, which wasn't as good, I'll agree. But still.
Yeah, all he hears is that something's been taken out or changed. He doesn't wait to see if that's a good thing or a bad thing or neutral. He just immediately attacks it. Now, I will say the book's better. I think we all would agree the book's better than the movie overall, but that doesn't mean the movie is bad. The movie's very good. I mean, the V monologue when we first are introduced to V, the vile visage and all that stuff he uses with the V's, that's not in the book. That's in the movie, and that is amazing.
Yeah. There's go ahead, Jimmy. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Which part did you say was amazing?
His V monologue in the movie.
The beginning of the movie when he first meets Evie and he does the V monologue where he just says everything with V words, and it's like that's really good. I will say there's things in the movie that I like better than this. There's things in this I like better than the movie. So that's just me. I actually think the portrayal of some of the government guys is actually better in the movie than it is in here. But we'll get into that. I think, and I just wanted to kind of touch base on the movie versus this first. But I say at this point, let's dig into this. So your guys' general impression. So what do you think about, like, we start down this road, like that opening? There's definitely some differences in Evie, like, because she's younger in this when she meets V. Her reason for meeting V is very different. Like, the reason she gets in trouble is very different. Like, because she's basically trying to feed herself, and she's basically trying to prostitute herself out. When she gets caught by the pigment. Yeah. So, I mean, and she really is a kid almost in this at the start. Like, this is very much her journey into an adult as much as it is like anything else. Whereas in the movie, she's already older. What did you guys think about Evie and this and the journey that she goes on? Just like where she is at the start of this book versus where she goes. We'll start with Carson.
Yeah, I definitely think this opening scene is more interesting than the movie's scene. I mean, I still really enjoy that one, of course, but in here, like, you can tell Evie is just, the world has just crapped all over her, basically. If she's offering herself into prostitution at the age of 16, then obviously nothing is going her way at all. I mean, you can see that right off the bat. She has no clue what she's doing. She immediately has the bad luck of prostitutioning basically a police officer or whatever they call him in this. I always
finger man.
Yeah, finger man. Yeah, she prostitutes a finger man, and then it turns out to be like a whole group of them who don't care. They think they're above the law, and that's where our story goes from there, where she meets V and that stuff. But I did kind of appreciate this version more just because it just so it shows the desperation people are having to sink to in this world.
Yeah, I think that's a significant change in the character that causes a different interpretation, right? The fact that in the book she's 16 years old, and her parents, her mother died, her father was taken away to the camps, never seen or heard from again, and she's trying to make it on her own. Whereas when we encounter Evie in the film, she's in her 20s. She has a career. She was on her way to see Gordon, who you don't even meet until like book 6 or 7 of a 10 volumes collection, and just that whole sure, they got an older actress, to do the role, who's more established. They wanted to get that theater draw. I get it. So they had to make some changes to that, but it changes the tone of how you look at Evie in general across the story because of her age.
I would agree with that. What about you, Big Will? What do you think about that change?
I like how in the beginning it starts off with this disembodied voice of fate that we don't meet until later, and then it's just kind of showing us the outside world going in, and we're watching Evie and V both get ready as the voice of fate's just telling us what the queen is wearing, or all this other kind of stuff. And it gives us some information, like the queen's 16 years old, so that means the actual queen is dead.
Queen Zora,
yeah. So you can tell it's okay, this is different. And then
tone setting to kind of give you an idea of the landscape that you're.
And then it's on the second, I think, it's after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. The 11th panel is when we see chapter 1, the villain.
Right.
I like that intro there, that beginning where you're like, okay, let's get ready for the ride. Get your seatbelt on. We're about to go.
So apart from the dialogue, there was scene setting in there. I did like how the panel reenactment was very similar to the actual film, right, where it shows Evie getting ready to go, getting ready to go out, for the night. She's putting makeup on and everything, and then she encounters the Finger Man.
Yeah. That whole setup is very similar to the film. You have the voice of fate. The difference is, like, in the film they actually make it like a guy who, like, whereas in this, the voice of fate, like, nobody knows what the voice of fate is, like, or who that is. It's just this voice, like, in here, like, that just projected through. So there's no person. It's like the voice of fate, literally, which is like an interesting approach to the way they took that, and the way people probably would affect people psychologically a little differently than, not that the guy isn't effective or whatever, because he's definitely, we see that in the real world. We see these people that kind of take those roles and try to influence people. But
and for the people in the chat who may not understand what you're saying, it's like a radio broadcast in the book, whereas he's on television.
Yes,
in the movie.
So it's very much like this. And I think that's important too, because in this world, whereas they talk about in the movie, it's after a war, and they still have. There's a little bit of the technology has been sort of knocked back a little bit. Of course, this was also 80s, but it appears that because
that's the thing to really keep in mind. The point you're going on there, JP, is that the movie came out at a time where technology was far more prolific. Television and all this. This was started being written, in 1981. Yeah. It's like
radio was still a very different thing, and it's kind of like they don't really. You can tell also a little bit like the result of the war is technology has been knocked back a little bit. It appears through this book, not a ton, but like a little bit. It's like there hasn't been the progress that we saw in the real world during that time. It's it's kind of stagnated because of that, and. So, but Big Will brought up a really cool thing that I do love about the way they introduce this is chapter 1, the villain, which is the first panel you actually get to see him completely. Do the right thing here. And you can see, and I just think that it's a great introduction that he's the villain. So what do we think about that? He portrays him right off the bat as the villain, which as you read the story, you come to realize it's both true and not true. As think about V as a character. What do you think? I'll start with Jimmy this time. What do you think about that and how they introduce him in this?
I mean, I don't know. From a theatrical standpoint, I mean, he is the villain, right? I mean, he's the anti-establishment. Granted, we treat him as we see him as the anti-hero later on, right? He's trying to shake the foundations of society and get people to realize that they've been living in a police state, and they've accepted this, where their freedoms have been completely removed. And sure, to society at large at that point, he would be the villain. He goes on and he does villainous things. He murders Fingerman. He blows up a couple of buildings. So, it's it is definitely a villainous take, to introduce him as.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because he very much he is a villain. He's not and he even admits that as he goes through the story. Like at the end of the story, he admits that he's a villain. There's part of the reason why he kind of passes everything on to Evie, and that's jumping way ahead, but he knows he's not a villain, but he's also, so he's got these two sides of him. He has this vendetta against these people that did what they did to him that he's carrying out. But he also has these other larger goals. What about you, Big Will? What do you think of him and how they portray him as he comes into the story?
Well, I like how the main panel of him, chapter 1, the villain, because basically he is. I mean, this book to me is about if this is the world you let happen, these are the people you're going to get. There is no real hero in this book. And I like how the first words we hear for multiple panels spoken from V are, I believe, Shakespeare, Macbeth, if I'm not mistaken.
Macbeth,
He's quoting a play. And in response to being asked, "Who are you?" from Evie, he actually says, "Me? I'm the king of the 20th century. I'm the boogeyman, the villain, the black sheep of the family." That's his explanation of himself.
Yeah. It's a very cool introduction. Like they handle it, like you talked about his monologue, like right at the beginning of the movie being so good and such a great introduction of the character. This is different, but just as powerful, I think, in a lot of ways. Like the way they pull this off.
They're either on par. The book to me is slightly better.
Yeah. What do you think, Carson, about this?
I mean, that is definitely the most interesting question of this book. Like, is V the villain of the story? Is he the hero of the story? What makes him different than, say, for instance, a character like the Joker, who also thrives on chaos and takes a young lady and corrupts her and dips her in acid, makes her all this crazy stuff? Like, is he truly any different than V? So they have 10 issues to kind of explain and make you want to root for this guy. But even after you've read it, you're just like, what he did, I guess, did he do the right thing? And he was just basically a guy at the end of the day who wanted the world to change. And in some ways, we all kind of do. So then we all start to feel for this kind of villainous character. And that's where it really starts to become thought-provoking.
Yeah, I disagree. I think that he is the villain because of the world that he's in. What he's doing is villainous. I mean, it's like American Revolution. They were traitors to the crown. They were the villains. Now, we look at them as being the good guys,
sure,
because of why they were being the villains, but they were, in fact, the villains to the crown.
I'm sure they'll appreciate that little bit of irony there as well.
Yeah,
as much as they love the colonies.
Yeah, but I think that's a good point. Is you guys touched on a couple of things. Is I would agree. There's not really, in some ways, everyone in the closest thing you actually have to a hero in the story is Evie, and she's not really. She's more of someone she's more of to a certain degree, the storyteller, even though it's not from her perspective. But this is like, she comes into his life, and this is the story of him and her life to a certain degree, and everything that happens as a result of that. But like, there's no real hero here. Like
right. You're right about that, because the fact of the matter is that it is being told from her perspective, right? I mean, right. Yes, it tells other stories as well. It tells stories about the different heads of state and such. But for the most part, it's about what's going on with her, right? How she's brought into this, and she sees what he's doing, and what he's doing is, it's terrible, it's horrible, right? She's killing people. She doesn't want to be part of it. Yet, as she goes through it, he opens her eyes to the world that she had been part of, and how that being a part of it, she was allowing it to happen. She wasn't doing anything about it. And that, her being educated by him, taught her, to kind of see things from his perspective.
Yeah.
But that's really the long game in the story as well. I mean, you have to consider that the first book is a revenge story, right? Yeah. It's about him taking revenge on the people who tortured him in this penitentiary. Him and a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then the fact that they finally shot him, it wasn't until they got to the higher level people that he started bumping off that they realized that he's killed 40 other people already.
Yeah, and that's very true. Like the first part of it is like you meet him and he blows up this building or whatever, and he kind of tells Evie he has these bigger goals, But really, it is like he's just out for he's got a vendetta. He's out for revenge on these people that like basically experimented on him and turned him into what he is. And it's not till because you get a great line at the end of that, like from Finch, and where he talks about like whether or not it's over or not, because he's killed after he kills, and I'm not going to find it now, like to remember how it's
after he kills the doctor.
After he kills the doctor, where is that at?
Oh, that's like the end of where I left. So.
Yeah, he was talking about if that's the best case scenario, that he's wreaked his vengeance and now he's done, or if this is just a part of his overlaying game that he's just getting started.
Yeah,
I think that was at the end of like volume 1, basically.
Yeah, here it is.
Yeah.
Let's see. So he talks about, we deal with something like this irrational. I mean, we didn't keep any records of it. So it appears to be a vendetta. So you expect me to believe that anyone would kill 50 people? He talks about it being a cover story. And where is this at? I'm still not finding it.
It's right here. You see there are two
kill over 50 people for no other reason than to provide himself with a cover story. The very idea is madness.
So that, but when Finch is explaining it, there's a good line in there.
He might never have been at Larkill at all. Do you see? It could all be another smokescreen, a false trail, another cover story.
Yeah, because he talks about that he killed all these people.
Because he's reading from the diary.
Yeah.
Right? And the diary is,
Are you talking about the line, the whole exercise was an elaborate, chilling vendetta?
Yes. There it is, yeah.
That's on page 85, second.
Yeah, the whole exercise was an elaborate, chilling vendetta. That's the explanation that I find reassuring, funnily enough, because that means he's finished now. It means it's over. The second motive is even more sinister. Like I said, everyone who could have identified him is now dead. What if he's just been clearing the ground? What if he's planning something else? And I think, and that's how then the next page basically, but that's how book 1 ends, is basically he's been on this vendetta. They don't know what his goal is. He's killed all these people that could have figured out who he was and what his goals were. And now what's next? And they don't know. And I just think that is a great, because like you said, it's a great wrap up to that book, and it's a great setup for everything that comes after. Because that's really what he did, is he went through and bumped off anybody that could find him. What do you guys think about how Moore wrote that, how that sets up everything else that comes?
Yeah, I definitely think for me, this is when I really started getting into this book. I'll be honest, the first half of issues 1 through 3, it was kind of a hard read for me. I wasn't getting too much into it. I kept getting distracted. But once you start getting into Finch and this other doctor's story who is in that asylum, the coroner now basically, and once you hear her story and her interact with V it seemed like V did kind of sympathize with her a little bit. And the fact that, when he poisoned her, it was a painless poison and all that stuff. So he did let her off as easily as one could in that situation, I suppose. Mm-hmm. But then they started adding the characters I wasn't too familiar with, this Mr. and Mrs. Almond. Those where you get to see Mr. Almond try to strike first, and he ends up getting killed in the line of duty, basically, just because he's in the way of V. And then the whole downward spiral of Mrs. Almond, and this is really where the book started to take off for me.
Yeah,
and and it doesn't surprise me that a lot of those characters got cut out in the theatrical version, right? It becomes, while that story is important, throughout the course of this, because she becomes the one to ultimately kill, the head at the end. I forget his name. But, it was one of those things where, they played the ending differently. So they were able to erase that character, altogether. And then because Creedy was the guy who was really kind of, a bit more, trying to, do things on the, underneath, subterfuge, try to take the power. They cast Creedy in this instead of Almond at all.
So and the other thing that's kind of, I want to get into that a little bit. The structure of the government here is very different, because a lot of it is this fate that they talk about the voice of fate, but fate is a computer. Like, and they're doing a lot of their decisions that they're making is based off of this computer program. Like the guy who's in charge is really like, to a certain degree, a slave to this computer that they built to tell him what to do. Like, you know, and he sits in there and like, what do you think about that? The way they handle that in terms of the structure, kind of the government and the role the computer plays versus the guy who's the leader of this.
This is probably. Oh, go ahead, Big Will.
I was just going to say it makes sense with the fact that you have the fingerman, the nose, the ears, the mouth. Well, where's the brain? It's the computer.
Yeah.
So it makes sense in the world that they've created. And you're like, why would you call him a fingerman? Then you realize nose. Oh, that's why. Mm-hmm. It gets more clear.
They're the ones that get out there and touch you.
Yeah. It gets more clear, the world that he sets up when you learn all those pieces. Then the computer is the brain, and it's fate, the voice of fate. Fate is the brain, the computer. It just starts making sense. And it's like, okay, I can understand why some of these people might be a little crazy. They're not thinking on their own.
Actually, a part that I wish they had left in the film, rather than taking it out. It kind of it takes the blame off of humanity, that they placed in the movie, right? Like, these were people that were making these decisions and they were doing this, right? It takes the blame off humanity if you put a computer in it. It's like, well, we're fascists and we have fascist ideals, and yet we're taking all our cues from a computer. Well, was it the computers that said round up all the Pakistanis and the gays and everybody in colors and put them into a camp and murder them? Is that what it was? I don't know. Like, we've had Hitler, right? We've seen that. We've had that experience. But now they identify a third world war, that happened, and so I guess their idea was, hey, let's try a computer running the country because clearly we're not capable of doing it ourselves.
Yeah, that is the big difference here. It's like in the movie they very much play, and I can't think of his name now, like the leader guy as kind of a Hitler wannabe, and instead of whereas this is very much like that guy doesn't really have that persona at all. It's really this program that's driving this computer. What about you? We're going to say something before Big Will starts. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I was going to say, at first when I started reading this, I was like, man, I miss John Hurt and his character from the movie. But after a while, I definitely appreciate.
Well, he's in there. He's Susan. He's just not
absolutely.
He's just not as mean.
Right. But it's just like the more I kind of think about the character in the situation, I guess the more ahead of its time Alan Moore's writing was here, because now we're all kind of technology based now. We're all about technology and ingraining ourselves into it, wanting to plug ourselves in as much as possible. And the guy who's in charge of this government, or whatever you want to call it, he's basically in love with the computer. And that's where it gets kind of super weird. I kind of had to reread it a couple times just to figure out what was going on and just to kind of understand how weird this was getting. But the more I read into it, I'm just like, yeah, you're absolutely right. If this is the brain of everything that's going on, then they are in a far worse situation than I even thought.
Yeah. And that is like, that plays
a little weird.
It is weird, but it also plays a huge role about like sort of how he brings about the fall of the government to a certain degree differently than he does in the movie where he basically gets them to betray each other. Like, whereas in this, like basically he's cracked the computer. He's been like influencing the computer to help him. It's the big, like the reveal of how he's been doing a lot of what he's been doing is he's been manipulating the computer. Like he's in it. He's like programming in it. And when he reveals that to the guy, it just shatters him. Like, who's their leader? Like,
he's got no faith anymore. He's got nothing to believe in.
Yeah, the thing that's been driving him, fate that he's been following, that England will prevail. Like it's all been fake. It's all been manipulated, and I think that's a very interesting way to go about telling that aspect of the story of how he really like brings the fall of the people that are in charge, because he just goes into what they've been relying on, what they believe in. He cracks that, and I found that very interesting. And Escape. So
yeah, it's something else. And
so go ahead, Big Will. Sorry.
I done lost it. Go ahead.
So anything else from this first part you guys want to talk about, or do we want to dig into kind of the second part of this story and his visit to the TV and his speech there, as opposed to what we get kind of in the movie version?
I would just say that, like, yeah, if you're tracking against the film, the first book, I should say, that the first 3 issues pretty much track, to the film, for the most part, in terms of like, sequence and movements, where he fulfills his vendetta. He goes out and he takes out the people, who did him wrong, and you learn about, what happened to him. But from there, that's where it kind of gets into a little bit different.
Yeah. So it does go a little differently, but not a ton. Like the TV is in a different place. Like where he goes into the TV station is in a different place. The biggest difference is Evie going to Gordon, and Gordon being her sort of a friend, and also like there's a very different relationship between Evie and Gordon in this. And Gordon's a very different person. Like he's not. Like he's kind of a criminal himself. I mean, he's involved in criminal enterprises himself.
So let's get into that in a second. I know Big Will had something he wanted to say.
Are any of you musicians? Because I really want to hear this played. But I don't know.
I'd have to learn it.
Yeah.
But the book goes sideways for a bit at the start of the second.
It does.
It has like musical notes as V's playing on the piano this song called Vicious Cabaret. And it goes for a few pages.
Cabaret.
Yeah.
It goes for several pages like that, yeah.
5 pages of it. I can't remember if it's in the movie or not, but I've always wanted to hear that played and sung just to see what it's like.
I don't think so. That's not the song that he plays. Yeah.
Yeah, and it tells part of the story too, just this weird way with like the lyrics in between the music.
The first 8 measures are all just, I mean, you see where there are X's, that's all just, that's percussion.
Yeah.
And then it actually gets into musical notes. So it would just be like, going through each of the notes, but then, then it actually picks up into actual music.
It would be interesting to hear that play, just because,
I wonder if somebody's done it online somewhere.
I'm sure.
So, like, what do you think about the part I was wanting to get to, though, is his speech to the people when he takes over the TV station is very, very different here than it is in the movie. And then basically the whole thing about letting them go and talking about the course of history and how they've given up their, like, what is the great line? Let's see. Who like
what are we talking about?
Page 113.
When he's on the TV thing, and like there's just a bunch he's like, we've had us, he talks about like, you're wondering why I called you all here. I'm thinking about letting you go. Like, he's
talking about humanity.
Yeah, he's talking about humanity, and it's a very different speech and tone, like, than what you get in the movie. Like, it's just, he comes at it from a very different perspective, and he's talking about like through the course of history how we've basically, allowed these people to take over. And the particular line I'm looking for, I'm not finding at the moment.
Yeah, I think this was like one of the more interesting turns in comparison to the movie because, like I said, I had to do some I had to look up some articles just to see some of the differences for myself so I'd fully understand them. And I think here's where you see like the main difference is I feel like in the movie between his speech here and when he was mailing out those masks, he really wanted to take this like Guy Fawkes type character and expand it to everybody. But in this story, he only really wants to eventually expand it to one person, and that's Evie.
Correct.
So going back to the whole first 12 panels of him referring to himself as the villain, I definitely see more of that villain type character here because he's basically assigning blame for their current situation, not only on the government and the people running the government and the machines, but the people as well who are sitting and doing nothing about it.
Yeah. And he's talking about how like they haven't done anything, and the line what I was looking for was, though to be sure the management is very bad. In fact, let's not mince words. The management is terrible. We've had a string of embezzlers, frauds, liars, and lunatics making a string of catastrophic decisions. This is plain facts. But who elected them? It was you. You appointed these people. You gave them the power to make your decisions. While I admit that anyone can make a mistake once, to go about the same lethal error century after century seems nothing short of deliberate. You have encouraged these malicious incompetents who make your life worth shambles. You have accepted without question their senseless orders, and you have allowed them to fill your workspace with. You could have stopped them. All you had to do was say no. You have no spine, no pride. You are no longer an asset. I will be generous. I'll give you 2 years. And then you're fired, basically. He goes through this whole thing about he's like it's very different where he's in the movie, he's calling for the people to trying to empower the people, whereas here he's basically just calling them out that you've blown it, and I'm gonna do something about it. Or you got 2 years to figure it out. It's basically the difference in the speech. I think it's a very different tone. So I was just curious what you guys thought about that whole thing as he went through it. Jimmy, we'll start with you.
I thought it was a great monologue. I really did. It was good. It was. He's obviously speaking to the masses and getting that message out there. Much as they showed in the film, obviously with a different turn. I did very much appreciate it actually more because he's talking to humanity, not just to the people of London.
Right.
That they've pretty much failed themselves and brought this upon themselves, even with everything that they've done in the course of history with all the wars. But yeah, I mean, from a person who works in corporate America, it's pretty funny. You're fired.
Yeah, I do think this is one of the main parts of the book that I think, and I like the scene in the movie, but this just really outshines it to me. It's not even really close. At least for me. What about you, Seawood? What do you think about this?
I would say the only other big note I have two notes actually. Number one, it is kind of scary how you think about this speech when thinking about current events and the election and our current politics situation, that stuff, which I don't want to get into here, obviously. But it just kind of hit me when you guys were talking. I wonder how much of Alan Moore's actual voice is used in this speech and his beliefs and, his frustrations with everything.
I would say a lot. Yeah. I feel just given what we know about him, what we've learned about him over the years, I feel like this is very much what Alan Moore thinks about humanity.
Yeah, I kind of feel like if he took off that V mask, it'd just be Alan Moore's beard blousing out of the bottom of it at this particular
scene. I would,
yeah.
I would agree with this score Vidal that it works great in but would be harder to do in the film. And I agree with that. I think they took a different route in the film. I think probably for a reason, because this probably didn't work nearly as well. If they stuck with this word for word, I would agree it probably would not have worked as well as it does here. But
language is always one of those things that's tricky. You can't lose an audience because you're talking to too much in what's what I'm looking for. Not directly, right? Too much in metaphor. That's the word. That you can tend to lose an audience, and that coming in the mid part of the film, you don't really want it to be, too much.
So the other, before we get into the part that another part that's very consistent with between the two, which is her when he recaptures her or retakes her. Like before we get into that, I want to talk about a little bit about Inspector Finch, and how that is a very different storyline here than in the movie. Like this Inspector Finch. What do you guys think of this Inspector Finch?
Before we get into that, JP, could we go back to Gordon? I mean, you started on Gordon.
Yeah, let's do Gordon first. Okay.
This part is a good time to really kind of talk about that, since so Gordon had a TV show, right? And he was, in the film, Gordon had a TV show, and he made mockery of Susan, of the head or whatever the hell he's called, the voice of fate.
Yeah.
And that's what got him in hot water while, Evie was staying with him. But, again, different character change, right? He's not somebody that she gets romantically involved with. He becomes the icon of everything that they've taken from them, right? He's gay and he has to hide it. He has objects, like books and literature. He's got a Quran, things that they want to destroy. They didn't want as part of it. That's the point of fascism, right? It's, removing all the pieces that don't fit their puzzle, right? Or the frame of their picture. And I appreciated how they did that in the film, and how they took that, because to be honest, Gordon in this, in the book, he was just kind of another person in her life that was taken from her.
Yeah.
Where he played a more iconic role in the film.
That's a really good point. That was where I originally planned to go, and then I kind of forgot. So I'm glad you went back to that, because he's to be honest, he's a very forgettable character. Like when V turns her loose, like in the movie, like she sort of escapes from him, but he turns her loose when she doesn't want to help him, when she can't take murder, so he just turns her loose. And so she just basically, this guy ends up finding her and helping her. And so they end up falling in love, but it's really like, he really, other than just being kind of I sort of feel like just another excuse to show how bad the world is, and even to have something else bad happen to her before he brings her back. He's really just, that whole section is really just a means to an end to give him an excuse to take her captive for what happens later in here. Whereas in the movie, I would agree, he plays a much more important role of representing, like you said, everything that's being taken from people. Seawood, what do you think about Gordon's role in the two versions?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, JP. I think the character from the movie was a lot stronger. The one in here, you almost just don't want to like at all, because essentially he seduces a 16-year-old girl, which is just kind of sickening if you think about it. I mean, it seems like he's kind of trying to do the right thing by, getting a person into protection who has nowhere else to go, who can't help herself, but then like he has this like sorry excuse where like, I need that bedroom for something, but you can sleep in my bedroom. Like that's disgusting. That's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, he very much is. It's portrayed in this that he's actually a criminal also. Like he's part of a criminal enterprise, and like he very much is just taking advantage of her.
Absolutely.
And like he's helping her, but helping himself in doing so.
Yep.
What about you, Big? Well, what do you think of this version of Gordon?
Well, the book 2 is where we start getting into where I haven't had time to reread, so I'm a bit rusty on my book 2 and book 3. But that was the strange thing for me when I watched the movie after reading the book first. I was like, wait a minute, that's different.
Yeah.
And I think they give him more in the movie. He seems like to be more of a character than in the book, but I think I like the book better because, like in this world, there is no real true hero, and everyone's a villain, and that's more consistent with the book than it would be thinking of the world being that watching the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think just in the movie, they kind of use his character to show how bad the world is, whereas you can almost see that in every character in the book. You don't really see that as well in the movie until you meet Gordon, because he literally has this whole room of just banned materials that, like, you could probably find in our society pretty easily. Like, religious iconography is illegal in that world, and he has it. And they eventually later reveal that's what gets him killed, is having that stuff rather than just harboring Evie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, rather than him, the little stunt he pulls on the show isn't what gets him killed. It's
Right.
It's the religious stuff.
Yes.
I do think, like, in the movie, they don't really talk about the Shadow Gallery as much in here in terms of, like, all this. You see it, you see all the stuff that V has sort of saved, but they don't really talk about why he's done it. And here they talk about it both in the movie, and then they also have Gordon kind of have the same thing, which is maybe unnecessary, I guess. But, like, I do think he's a stronger character. I wouldn't argue with Big Will that it probably fits better in the world that they build in this, that he's not that character.
Yeah, and I think they do a more subtle job of letting you know that they've taken away, like, music and everything, because Evie, this is like the late 90s, and Evie has no idea about Dancing in the Street, the song. But I mean,
Yeah.
But by that time, everyone should have heard the original song, the Van Halen cover, everything. Yeah. So that's kind of
a lot of the stuff that V has, she's never even heard of in this world. Like, it's definitely, you can tell that part of that has to do with her being younger, like that she wasn't old enough to remember some of this stuff, whereas she sort of can in the movie.
Because she also says, all I've ever heard is what they play for the military broadcast. Yeah. So that is the part that really lets you know, okay, this is a world without any art.
Yeah,
it's all been taken away, right? Because that freedom and they took all those people that did that and they locked them up, right? Then eventually, killed them all, or they all died of starvation, dehydration, what have you. And it does kind of paint that picture of the point that he was trying to get to about the fascism, and it takes away not just your rights, but it also takes away your culture, right? It erases everything. In its path. Yeah,
there's only room for what it says is okay, and not anything else, or other perspectives, and that's where they go to.
I mean, they're right next door to Russia. During the 80s when he's writing this, right? So he's not traveling too far to see examples of that exact same scenario. With the KGB rather than the Fingerman. It's just. It's a perspective on something that could happen and might happen if things don't change, or if things change in the wrong way.
I mean, it's very much the Nazis and the Soviets and and the KGB, and there's a lot of discussion of fascism in here, and like really driving that was real world driven, like things that happened in the real world in some cases, like that they're taking inspiration from.
Yeah.
I think because we've talked about that, I think let's talk about, to me, what is kind of the iconic sequence, both in the movie and in this, when Evie gets captured and goes to a camp and they're pressing her for the information to give up information on V that she doesn't really have. But and the fact that it's all just him trying to, what he says at the end is set her free. And I think Big Will gave a really good perspective of earlier talking about the Joker and Harley, of basically he's mentally traumatizing her to set her free, which it does. I mean, like it. Like, what do you guys think about that sequence and how it's in here, how it reads in the book?
I love the title.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say I love the title of how once she's thrown into this room, wakes up, it goes Chapter 10, Vermin.
Yeah.
There's a rat in here.
Yeah.
Basically, what she is at that moment is just a vermin. And then V kind of molds her into another him. And what is he but a vermin to the machine that is the government in this world? The villain, the vermin, the pest.
Yeah. Yeah, the vermin. Yeah, it's like three chapters. Vermin, Valerie, and Verdict is that section of the story. What about you, Seawood? What do you think about the way it is here?
I mean, I think you're exactly right. For me, when I think the story of E for Vendetta, this is probably the most iconic sequence in the whole thing, is just seeing Evie put through this torturous whole experiment of V's. And I mean, you definitely got to mention the whole story on the toilet paper as well about, that just shows how much, more art and freedom was taken away from the people of Britain, where, you get the gay actress who was acting in all these wonderful movies and had 3 years of roses, I believe is the way she put it. And then the world started getting worse. She lost a girlfriend. She eventually, got caught too for, being homosexual and locked up in one of these camps. And it turns out she was one of those, 24 experiments or however many there were.
Yeah, she was number 4 next door.
Yeah, room number 4, exactly. So that means she had to be like one of those final 5, most likely, as well, on the experiments. So, and then you get the origin of why he leaves that rose at all of the crime scenes as well. So a lot of, and I definitely appreciate the way he tells a story more in this, how you kind of integrate these torturous scenes of her being drowned and shocked, mixed with these wonderful scenes of the two actresses together and her whole origin story. So it's quite and you basically see the rise of this new army that's messed up their government too, on top of it.
Yeah.
So he's doing a lot in like one issue here, and I always appreciate when a writer can do that.
Did you notice how little dialogue and words in general is in the Verdict? There's many panels that are just art.
Yeah. It's the least verbal portion of the entire thing in terms of like reading wise. It's very much a visual. That's very much a visual section of when he basically, there's nothing left to threaten with, is there? You're free. And then when he leaves, it goes a couple pages before you get anything.
Yeah.
Well, there's no dialogue because it's just her walking the hallways, figuring out
and
where
realizing that it was all fake.
Yeah. And even the cover of this issue, paints the picture of what you're looking at.
Yeah.
With the hair cutting and and the devices, everything, and her being taken back. It's striking. And I'm so happy that they did not detract from that at all in the film. I mean, it plays out almost verbatim from the page, from panel to celluloid. And what they did with, what was her name? Valerie? Yeah, with Valerie, the toilet paper note and everything. It is one of the most notable and memorable scenes in the entire film. It's what makes it, as powerful as it was, right? It really kind of drives home what was, the stories of people, of how they lived and how they died. The point of I got 3 years of roses, right? All the struggles she went through, coming out to her parents and, living by her ideals and being able to work in the world, it was all taken away, but she had those 3 years of happiness that she can still sit back on and think about that in her cell.
Yeah. I will say the worst part about getting it in the trade is there is no cover gallery.
Oh,
I
I'll
know.
go through them at the end.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll have
they
you-
actually added them back in the hardcover.
Oh, the
'Cause
hardcover does have them.
Yeah, because I also read most of it digitally, which they don't have the chapter breaks of the covers. It just keeps going.
Yeah,
Well, at
it
least
just
here in the
keeps going
hardcover,
here.
they show you where it breaks out with the next
Nice.
cover for the issue.
To be honest, I mean, for the chapter breaks, I mean, you know, it's in the panel, right? So you know when you're hitting on it, or it's that that grayscale page.
Yeah.
You know, that's the tone set is like, boom, okay, that's the next chapter, and you know they'll give a little chapter panel, you know, a little bit later in there. And like I said, that's kind of one of the beautiful things about it being across a 26 issue magazine run, you know, was that, you know, there's a lot to it, you know, and it's broken out into all these different things. And I just thought it was fun how they put it all back together in this, you know, but it actually came from someplace else.
Yeah. I do think Gore talked about Lloyd's art in this being masterful. We haven't really talked about his art much, but he is like, to see her deteriorate while she's a captive, like very much like you would see somebody who was a captive in one of these situations, and when like how sunken she gets and how like thin, and like he does just a
wrinkles across her forehead. Yeah.
He just does a spectacular job of just making her look, you know, to show the suffering that she's been going through. And Lloyd does just a fantastic job during this whole, like the whole book he does, but like during this sequence, it is just, to me, it's just very outstanding. What do you guys think about his art just in general in this sequence, and then just in general in the book? Because we haven't really talked about that yet.
Well,
go ahead.
Correct if I'm wrong, but this is watercolor on pencils, isn't it?
I believe so.
I think so.
The originals were penciled, so the colorist is not Lloyd. So Lloyd didn't do that because the magazine was black and white.
The magazine was just black and white.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, man, the art is good.
He actually took part in it. So the color artists are listed out as Steve Whitaker, Siobhan Dodds, and David Lloyd.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so he did help with the coloring. Okay.
Yeah, but I said one of the downsides of this is no cover gallery in the standard trade paperback. One downside for the series in general is how small and tight most of the panels are when you add in the all the page numbering and everything, and all the words and everything. It's real small and tight, so you can't see the artwork as well as you would want to. But you can tell this is great art.
You consider that it was in a format that was a little bit larger before and had to be shrunk down in order to fit the format of a comic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, I do think that, and these are very standard comic pages. They're 9-panel, you know, like, you know, it's three, almost every page is three rows and
standard 9-panel grid.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's a standard 9-panel grid, and so he does a lot in each of these panels. But yes, it's, you know, a lot of it I would love to see splash pages in here, and you don't get them.
Yeah, but that's why the part where Evie's walking the corridor and it's just art, no words or anything. That's when the art shines, because that's all there is. Yeah, like that.
Yeah, and then you do get the one really cool splash panel of that as well.
Yeah.
Oh, he's got
the negative space is fantastic.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, where she comes to where you see him when he says welcome, welcome home. Yeah, welcome home, and then you see her in the doorway, like, what the?
Yeah, you don't get what I talked about before.
You don't get that in the paperback trade. Like, you don't get the other side of that. You get him in the gallery, but you don't get the big panel that Carson was just showing.
Yeah, that's what I was just trying to think. Like, I kind of don't remember that panel when I read it on my iPad.
Big, JP.
And these are the separator panels that I was talking about that would happen before a chapter or when a chapter starts.
See, you don't get those in the regular trade.
Yeah,
Really?
You get the base story, and that's it in the trade
That's
paperback.
interesting. Yeah, because you'll get that, and then you know.
Yeah, you don't get that.
Yeah.
Dang, so you're saying I need to get the hardcover is what you're telling me.
Or get the floppies.
Well, let's say it depends which one. This is the 30th anniversary hardcover.
Yeah,
And then I read the trade on my iPad as well, so there's definitely differences.
Yeah. Well, it's like for Watchmen. I mean, Alan Moore's stuff is intense, so you can do the Watchmen trade paperback. You get the story, or you can buy the anniversary edition, the hardcover, and you get all the
different versions.
Did they do a recolor of that too? Because on Killing Joke, they did a completely rehaul of the colors on that.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think when we read that on Modern Men, like, because we had I mean, it's like almost night and day on the colors. If you like that 80s style color scheme, you're going to be mad if you get a new edition of Killing Joke, because it is recolored from the ground up for like digital colors, and it just parts of it just do not look right. That's why I was going to ask you guys, like, if they've done any recoloring or touch-ups to this since the 80s, or if most of what you guys read this time
doesn't look like it to me
from the original publishing.
I don't think they've ever really touched it, other than maybe showing the original black and white.
Yeah,
this is watercolor, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I definitely enjoy the look of it for sure.
Okay, well, now let's go into Finch, the detective, because this is a very different story for Finch also compared to if you've only seen the movie. Like, this detective is, where he ends up going is very different. I mean, it's similar in terms of the path of, like, he starts questioning, and as he's tracking V, he starts questioning everything that's going on and trying to figure out when he starts finding out what happened at Lark Hill and, like, going down this path. But he basically just goes crazy. I mean,
talk about getting inside the subject's mind. I mean, he goes to Lark Hill to see, to see where it all happened, but then goes and takes 4 tabs of acid. Like, who does that?
Yeah, it's just like something was given drugs. I need to take. It's like, wait, what?
Right?
I gotta say though, like, I think I enjoyed Finch a lot better here than the movie, because it felt like I feel like he, of all the characters in the movie, we didn't get to see played out too much. So when he does that, like, good guy face turn at the end, like, you almost just don't buy it. It just seems like a convenience thing at the end, so he doesn't stop Evie and V from flipping that switch and blowing up Parliament at the end of that movie. Whereas here you get to see his entire journey where he's as beat down as everyone else. He throws himself into his job because that's really the only thing he has going for him in his life. His significant other was basically murdered by V, and then he gets given this journal, which basically V left there for him to find, and that's when it opens up this whole can of worms that, like, the person he loved and cared about wasn't this perfect angel of a person either. She talks about how when she was in that asylum, she saw these people and she just almost hated them for the way they looked like, the way they looked at her. She hated them, and talked about how the torturous experiments, some of the people in the asylum liked doing those experiments. And that's when you kind of see his character turn for the worse a little bit, where he becomes a little bit more angry and he starts throwing punches at people, and he finally goes to the scene and pops some LSD and gets crazy. So I definitely appreciate his character a lot more in the book.
And it ends with him, not anything with Evie or V.
Right.
Like, the last panel of the story is him walking away. Like,
it cleans up 2 characters. Like, it finishes his his journey of him just walking away, and no, that's him walking back, right?
No, it's him walking away. Like,
is at the very end.
Yeah.
Okay. So so that finishes up his character arc, as well as what's her name? Oh my God, the woman that was married to one of the officials who was pulling the strings.
Oh, okay. That's a character that's not even in the movie. Like the lady that tries to take over. Yeah, after Sutler or whatever is killed, that, like, she's also trying to pull the strings. Yeah.
So I mean, I think I think that is an angle that could have been leveraged in the movie, but it would have brought in too many characters, right? You would have had to bring in her husband, the Scotsman, and then his entanglement with Gordon. So it's just there was too much there. So it didn't really play enough into the story, in general. So I'm not surprised it got jettisoned in the screenplay. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I didn't really care for the character. Like, he didn't really do anything for me other than the fact that, he got inside of the mind of a madman and went crazy in the process and came back and, happened to be the killing stroke, right? Like he seemed to just be there to be the guy to actually kill V, so that Evie could become V at the end.
Yeah. So
I didn't really enjoy the character.
Like, I think this is a more fleshed out version than we get in the movie. Like Big Will says, there's a more of an understanding of his journey, or Carson, I don't remember which one you said it, but like, I don't think it's a great character, like, necessarily compared to some of the other characters in the book. So let's get into the end game here, because this is a very different end game than what we get in the movie, obviously. Like, V doesn't get his revenge on Creedy and the head guy. I cannot remember that guy's name. Yeah. He doesn't get his revenge on that. That guy's actually killed by other people during this. And, he's still trying to blow up Parliament. We still get the train. He still kind of turns it over to Evie, but he sort of just sets up Finch to kill him for why? I don't know. Like, that whole part, other than
catalyst.
Yeah, like,
it was a catalyst. That's all it was. He what was he going to do? Live in the new world?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of feel like that, because he gives a speech to her that the new world all the killers need to go. The new world needs to be made by by non-killers. But yeah, non-killers need to go into the future. But it did seem very. I was less satisfied by the way they did this than I was the movie, but it also sort of makes sense too, like the way they do it here compared to the movie. What did you guys think about the major differences between the end game here? Let's start with Carson again.
I kind of think it was cool the way they ended it here. It felt more like a played out crime thriller than this like uplifting anarchy type ending that they had in the movie. Especially like you get to see the other characters' perspectives instead of just Evie and V. Like you said, you get to see, which, by the way, I didn't like Creedy as much in the book for whatever reason. Like I said, it's one of the main reasons I kind of want to reread it, is just to get to know their version of Creedy a little bit more, because he wasn't played up as much in the first half. So I really wasn't too attached to the Creedy character here. But you get to see, you get to see Mrs. Almond do the assassination of the guy in charge, Susan, and that you get to see her whole descent into madness play out. And I mean, the whole thing with Finch, like I said, I kind of didn't mind that, because, at the end of the day, the only thing Finch felt like he was probably pretty good at is his job, and he still felt the need to do his job at the end and take out V, even though I think they all knew that V is just an idea, and you can't really hurt or kill an idea when it gets out there. So I think that's the ultimate thing, is to become that martyr and that catalyst and affect just that one person in Evie. Like I said, the main difference between the book and the movie is he was just trying to affect Evie, whereas in the movie, he wanted to get everybody's attention. So I think in sacrificing himself, he got Evie's attention, and she had to take up that mantle, basically.
It was like a speech at the end. She actually dresses up and gives a speech to the crowd at the end, as opposed to, just pulling the lever, which is all she does in the movie to a certain degree, to send him on his way. She actually dresses up as V and kind of takes on the persona.
See, I felt that was played out for a specific reason, right? Like, I don't think his intent was to get Evie to become V. I think his intent was just to open her eyes and have her be a person that, that he touched, that he would, he would live on, and and she would be that catalyst, help with that catalyst for change. But the going to the news studio and getting on the television and talking to the people and telling them, like waking them up and showing them what he's been doing, that was him trying to shake them out of their apathy towards the government and actually stand up and make that change. I think it's because Finch told people that he'd killed him, that word got out there, that was kind of toppling over that idea that Evie felt that she had to go out there as him to make sure that stayed, that the idea of V stayed alive, right? That they couldn't say he was dead, and then he just wanted the Viking funeral. He wanted the send off, to blow up, which in the movie was like the big crescendo ending. He went up and blew up the Houses of Parliament, and here he blew up Parliament much earlier, but there was nobody in Parliament. It was just a figurehead building. It was a symbol, to destroy, to take down. But in the book, they played out the same idea where he went and took out all of those main hubs, the ear, the eyes. He kind of gouged them out, to let people know that they couldn't, control you anymore. Do whatever you like. Do what you feel. What happened? They descended into chaos. But chaos is a tool of anarchy. It's going to happen. It's got to run its course. To what he tells Evie. But yeah, I don't think that his intent was to get Evie to take on the role. I think she took that on to make sure that the idea stayed alive.
I don't know. I kind of disagree with that because of in his dying, like when he comes back and she's holding him as he's dying, he says, "Hush, first you must discover whose face lies behind this mask, but you must never know my face." Is that quite clear? And like, as she's thinking about it, is when she realizes that who V needs to be. It's like, at last I know who V must be. And that's when she goes, so like, he does kind of prompt her.
Yeah.
Maybe that wasn't his intent from the beginning. At the end, he does prompt her to like.
I think it was meant still to be more metaphorical than literal.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. I think either way, he was going to be on that train one way or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been going for like hour and 20 minutes. We could probably go a while, but let's kind of like start wrapping this up a little bit. Anything else you guys want to talk about before we wrap this up? Carson, anything we haven't touched?
Yeah. No, I mean, go ahead, Will.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think, we covered on most of the points I was pretty much going to make. I'm so happy I finally got to read this. Probably the only kind of surprise flipping through the pages here that I'm surprised the movie really expanded on that the book didn't is that little girl with the glasses that's leaving graffiti everywhere. I was kind of surprised that they used her a lot more in the movie because we really only get a couple panels of her in this book, and the Wachowski brothers actually used her quite a bit in the movie just as another martyr, basically.
Yeah, that is true. They do. That is something like the little girl does appear here, but she does not play like the role she does in the movie at all.
No, not even close.
No. What about you, Big Well? What any other last thoughts you were going
to say? That the writing of the book is tremendous, but don't discount David Lloyd either, because of work and the symbolism and the other stuff that you might not catch. Like, for example, no one writes a V this way. They're straight.
Right.
But what does that remind you of?
Anarchy.
Anarchy.
Nice.
Yeah.
And another thing here in the beginning is when they're killing everybody and he goes to, hopefully I can find it. Yeah, here it is. And he goes to kill, the pastor is the next one to be killed. I find it kind of funny that in his bed is a pentagram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he is evil.
Iconography going on.
Yeah, I will say, like I said, I do really wish this hadn't been, and maybe it was because of where they were publishing it. Maybe it's just the time because it was very standard. Everything back then, comic art was very standard. The 9-panel thing. I would love to have, like, if they had given David Lloyd like room to play, like the artists get more now, like splash pages and that kind of stuff. I realize you've seen those back then too, but I do feel like they very buttoned him up in this, and I do wish there was a little more, like he'd been given a little more elbow room instead of just all these 9 panels. Because in the 9-panel structure, he does some fabulous work, but it's very.
Yeah.
I do feel like it limited him maybe a little bit, but that's just me.
Part of that's the storytelling, I think. I mean, you've got number one, you've got all of the content that you've got to fit into it, right? It was in a, like I said, it was in a magazine run, and that magazine run, ended. I don't even know if the entire run of the book fit into the 26 volumes of the magazine, but he did those larger panels when he needed to, like those full page, ones like, Carson showed earlier, where she's just standing there and he's standing across the room to show the size and the scale of it. The rest of it primarily is storytelling, but the fact that the Big Will picked out, because my eyes kept drawing back to the bed for some reason. I was like, is there something on the bed, in the bed, or something like that? Like, but I couldn't pick it out, and that's kudos to you for seeing that where I didn't. Yeah, because it's definitely there to draw your eye to it.
I do think it's interesting the use of splash panels and stuff, because usually, like, if there's a splash panel used in a comic, it's used to display action. And in this, like, the other key difference between this and the movie is there isn't a need for like a ton of just bloodthirsty action like there is especially at the end of the movie. There's like a big final confrontational fight scene that takes out V. In here, it's more about just displaying the ideas, the dialogue, getting the characters across. Whereas in the movie, you do have that big ending fight scene where he's getting shot up and he's throwing knives at people and all that stuff. So,
the action is in 3 panels almost every time in this book. There's, something's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
The panel where it happens, and then the panel where there's the aftermath of, they're dead now, and that's it.
Yeah.
He's very efficient, that's for sure.
All right, well, I think unless you guys got any other final thoughts on V for Vendetta, I think we can wrap this up. So anybody got any final thoughts, and we'll get out of here?
Yeah, so read it. I think it's better than Watchmen.
Let me do the cover gallery, so you guys.
Oh yeah, let's do the cover gallery.
And then I've got a little surprise at the end. So it's a 10-issue run, and this is quite honestly an excellent opening issue cover. It kind of, it tells you something that you don't know already. In the film, at least in the book, is that the guy's wearing a false getup. Obviously, it's a mask, but the whole wig and everything else that's there. It's pretty cool. There's a shot from his eruption at Lark Hill with the 5 on the door here that signified the V.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's a cool. I do like that cover.
Yeah, that's nice.
Great cover gallery.
This is the him going into the television studio. And seeing, where it shows the that's like the Rex Randall as Storm Saxon. That's like the junk television that they put on there to entertain the masses. And then this is one of my favorites. So those of you who are not familiar with British television, there's a long-running show called What's My Line.
There was an American version as well in the 50s, the What's My Line.
Yeah.
It's a good show.
And Stephen Fry, I believe, who plays Gordon in the film, was also on that show for quite a bit. And this is where Ian gets it.
So there's your answer to the magazine question. It did not
took from 81 to 88 to get through the whole story.
Yeah. Well, that would be the verdict.
Oh yeah, this is her baptism in the rain after she's freed herself when they're on the rooftop.
Yeah.
Now, are these covers just covers, or are they wraparound?
They're just covers. Yeah, they're just they're single pane. I want to say that all of the back covers are all the same.
Yeah, the dominoes.
The dominoes and the merry-go-round.
Yeah,
Apparently,
man,
we had a merry-go-round down there, which is crazy.
and I really wish they had a cover gallery in the. We have his notes in the trade paperback from the Warrior magazines, but you don't get a cover gallery.
Actually, you do get them. They are here. They're just not full. They're just not. They don't really tell you that. Huh. Okay. Because they are in there, Big Will. They're just not full pages. Now that I'm seeing them.
And then the train.
Oh, yeah.
No. I assume that's the last. The train.
That's the last. That's under Victoria Station.
Very cool.
All right. So, as per Big Will's request, JP, if you could share out my screen.
Yeah. Add this to the screen.
This is the Vicious Cabaret play. I have not watched this, so anything goes
Yeah, I may
wrong.
have to mute all of us.
We all need to mute the mic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't share audio, did you?
Yeah, you didn't share the audio.
I'll turn my mic on then. Let me know if you can hear it. Well, that was interesting.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
You're still muted, JP.
So yeah, that was very different than what I was expecting in my head.
That's not how I said it.
It's cabaret.
I wasn't expecting some circus
It's a
thing.
cabaret.
It did sort of. Yeah. So, all right. Well, you guys got anything you want to pitch before we get out of here? We'll start with Jimmy. You got anything coming up?
Read a comic or 10.
There you go.
I've got a whole bunch of videos I have to edit. That's all I've got right now. I'm slammed, but I got a lot of content coming.
Nice. I will also say I am not surprised that Gorvidal liked it. Not that it was bad or anything, but that does not surprise me given what it actually. It didn't sound like what I thought, but I'm not surprised he liked it. So
and it doesn't. It sounded exactly like it should have played out in the book too. Yeah. Something just kind of creepy and eerie, along with the whole Phantom of the Opera look that he had going on.
Yeah, definitely. Big Will, what you got coming up, man?
To quote Jimmy, go out, read a comic, preferably this one. It's as good or better than Watchmen to me. And I will be on Barbarian Kung Fu's Buy It Now auction tomorrow. And I also get in what I'm going to be doing my Alex Ross Thomas variants on my wall in the mail tomorrow. So hopefully I will have a video within a week of how that's going to look over here on the wall, having all the Alex Ross Timeless variants.
Nice.
What about you, Seawood? What you got coming up?
Well, I guess since everyone else recommended it, yeah, go read this and read them all. Read Watchmen, form your own opinions. They're all good, so definitely read all of them. I recommend them too. I'll probably have to do an unboxing on my channel Sunday evening. Fish Tropic sent me an AOK, so I definitely want to say thank you to him by doing an unboxing for that. And then over on the Comic Core channel on Monday, I'll be reviewing Days of Future Past X-Men. I believe won our X-Men poll, so we'll be doing Days of Future Past, which, yay, 2 issues. I can't wait for that. The Comics of the Atom podcast, me and my friend Mike will be recording Sunday as well, and we're going to start reading Monstrous, which I've never read before. Looking forward to that. And then Tuesday, over back on my channel, I believe it's time also for me and Andy to read Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles volumes 8 and 9 of the IDW run. So we're going to read that whole run. And we just finished up the whole City Fall storyline. They're getting ready to go hide from Shredder for 2 volumes. So we'll see how that plays out.
Hey, Funk, you missed an hour and a half of us talking about V for Vendetta. So,
you missed the entire Vendetta.
Yes, you missed the entire Vendetta, but that's okay.
And everything else,
you go pick it up.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, go read it.
That's the basic. Go read it. Pick it up.
Because it is definitely very good. It is. I would probably agree with Big Will. It's probably my favorite Alan Moore story. I think I like it more than Watchmen. It's close. It's been a while since I read Watchmen, but yeah, I think it's close for sure.
And I also recommend the Superman stuff too. Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, one of my favorite all-time single issue comics. Got to say that one as well.
Yeah. So at some point coming up on my channel, obviously I do the look back every week. The next one I have scheduled is another round of East to West. We had to postpone the Saga one. DS had something come up. So, and I don't think I have any others scheduled yet. So I need to get back on that. And at some point in 2020, maybe the post office will deliver my CGC books and I'll do an unboxing. We'll see. So they've just been sitting on them for almost 2 weeks. So thank you, USPS. So, all right, everybody, we're going to get out of here. I want to thank you guys for hanging out for an hour and a half, especially Gore. I know was here the whole time. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that. And we will catch everyone later. Bye.